It's already in right now, so I am going to, as I'm sure people would like to hear from you all as opposed to me. So I just want to thank everyone who's participating today. On behalf of Kelly Cawthorn and Gongwer, we're very, very excited to be bringing you the road to 2024. This is the Republican Rundown. We could not be more pleased to be joined by Congressman, Ambassador, Chairman of the Republican Party, Pete Hoekstra. We're also joined by Bill G. Schuette, representative from the 95th District, as well as the chair of HRCC. So really on the front lines of the very, very important House elections right there. And Andrew Weiser, who is the president of ARW Strategies, a political strategist, pollster, and data consultant, who I know has a lot of experience in Illinois, the Midwest, and in particular Michigan right here. So we're thrilled to be joined by them. This panel will be moderated by Zach Gorchow, who probably doesn't need an introduction, but I'll give him one anyway. Zach is the president of Gongwer, Michigan, and I'm going to turn it over to Zach to kick this this first webinar off. So thank you very much.
Well, thanks a lot, Rob. It's good to be with everyone today. And on behalf of Gongwer, we're very pleased to be able to partner with Kelly Cawthorn on this series of webinars and to kick it off with a great panel of Republicans today. It's definitely an exciting time here, 5 weeks to go. And also want to tell folks we welcome your questions. There should be a Q&A button down there. If you have a question, please do put it into that Q&A list, and we'll be sure to get to it. We can reserve some time for questions at the end, but we'll try to get to your questions as we go through. We want this to be a nice, free-flowing conversation. So I think let me start off here with you, Pete, and for all of you, just a real wide-open question on what you think the overall state of the election is right now. I mean, this has been such a tumultuous year. The Democrats changing out their presidential candidate, had 2 assassination attempts against the former president, President Trump. And I could go on, but won't. But if Pete, if you could start out on where you see this election now that we're into the home stretch.
I'm very, very bullish on Michigan. And if you're bullish on Michigan, you're going to be very bullish about Donald Trump being elected to be the next president. The gateway to the presidency is going to run through Michigan. The issue set has been clearly defined, I believe. It is inflation. It's the economy. It's about jobs. In Michigan, it has been about jobs in the auto industry. In Pennsylvania, it's jobs in the energy industry. There is concern about what has happened along the border, border security, and the chaos that we see in the Middle East, that we see in Ukraine, that we see in China or South Asia. So the issue set has been, I think, very well defined. In Michigan, I find it interesting. I don't know the exact percentage of the dollars that are being spent by the Democrats at every level, whether it is the presidential level, whether it's the open Senate seat, or whether it's for state house races and those types of things. I find it interesting that the Democrats in Michigan are trying to make this election all about abortion. And it's kind of like, I don't think it's working. People recognize that in 2022, abortion, at least for the near term, medium term in Michigan, has been settled. It's enshrined into our Constitution. I may or may not like what was done and was passed by the voters, but that issue is, for all intents and purposes, is off the table. And what we're seeing, the one other thing I'll say is what we're seeing is lots of interest for the Trump campaign from the Black community, from UAW workers, from the Teamsters, from younger voters, from restaurant workers who don't like the increase in the minimum wage. They like the very simple solution, which is no tax on tips. And then you've got the Muslim community, all all these groups are taking a very serious look at voting for Donald Trump. Our polling numbers are good. The polling numbers for, for Mike Rogers are very, very good. We've got great candidates from Donald Trump to Mike Rogers down to candidates for the congressional seats and for our House seats. I think we're going to have a very, very strong 5 weeks. We're confident, and we're going to run through the finish line.
Andrew, what are you seeing in the surveying work that you're doing? How is this looking, if it is looking different from 2022? Of course, Republicans were very hopeful in 22 that inflation, the economy were going to be the driving issues, and it just didn't happen, at least in Michigan. Abortion did end up being the driving issue. What's different this time, if it is different?
Well, there's two things I'll say to that. Number one, the beginning of the summer, I think this was a landslide victory for Donald Trump. But obviously that's in the past. We're in the future right now. What we're seeing more globally is a candidate for the Democrats, vice president, who is a little better than Hillary Clinton, who ultimately lost, but not anywhere near where Joe Biden's numbers were at this point in 2020. And so, you're somewhere between a Donald Trump win and a Joe Biden win. That's sort of globally. And so with that, what I'd say is, I think this is as much of a toss-up. And so for anyone talking about national polls and, Kamala Harris is plus 2.8 or whatever the national average is. Her average is below Hillary Clinton's at this point in 2020. It's below, or in 2016, it's below Joe Biden's. And that's true nationally. And that's true here in Michigan too. As far as what the surveys show, inflation, the cost of goods and services, gas, that's not just a Michigan issue. That's a universal issue that we're seeing around the country. Same with border security, same with immigration. And it's not immigration as you knew it 10 years ago. It's about community safety. It's fentanyl coming across the border. And then okay, you have migrants coming here. And for decades, Democrats were like, yep, we can pay for all of it. Well, now a lot of Democrats, even in the cities, are like, wait a minute, we don't have the resources to support all of this. And so that's a major issue. Now, your point on abortion, I think the number one thing that I see is a lack of young enthusiasm right now. And I'm not sitting here going to predict that turnout among young voters is going to be down tremendously. But you look at the comparison of where the enthusiasm levels were in 2022, especially in Michigan, where you did have the abortion referendum on the ballot. Young voters, and that was an off-year election, their enthusiasm was through the roof. And right now, you just don't see it. And so I don't know if they'll turn out to vote. Maybe they will. But as it stands right now in the polling, you see a depressed enthusiasm with younger voters who typically are going to lean more Democrat.
And Representative Schuette, so you're dealing with, as opposed to the statewide situation, more of like isolated pockets of the state. I think you mentioned just before we started, you're downriver. I'm going to guess that's Wyandotte or something very close to it. What are you seeing in these kind of swingy areas, whether that's Wyandotte, Leelanau County, Marquette area, et cetera?
Yeah, so a couple of things, and you're very close. I'm in Riverview, so just next door. And what we're seeing at the state house level is the same things that Andrew and Chairman Hoekstra were talking about. Voters are concerned about the price of gas, the price of groceries, the fact that school safety funding has been cut by 92% in the last budget. Those are issues I know when I was knocking doors today, all three of which I heard about when I was talking to voters. And I think, one of the great things when you look at the race for the state house, the years where it's been disastrous for Republicans in down ballot races in the state of Michigan have been years like a 2008 where the McCain campaign just pulled out of Michigan and didn't contest it. Or 2022, where you saw significant investment from national money from the Democrats, but not from the Republicans. Those were really bad years down ballot for Republicans. I think as everybody's televisions can attest when they're watching the Tigers this week, there is no lack of money and investment in Michigan from either side. And that's the type of environment when you drill down to the state house level. We just need parity. We need a competitive environment. I think we're going to win Michigan from the White House to the state house, but we're set up in a position to win.
So we're just going to kind of work our way down the ticket here. And also just want to remind folks, feel free to use that Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom portal. Fire a question in there and we'll do our best to get it answered. So let's start with the presidential race. Obviously, a lot of discussion about the issues, inflation and the economy or abortion preeminent, but it does seem like so much of this is a personality decision. I mean, this is the third cycle with Donald Trump as the Republican nominee. I mean, to what extent is there room for him to grow and get new voters? I mean, people are just so familiar with him at this point. Can he get above the kind of, I think he topped out at like 47.5% in 2016, dropped a scotch in 2020. Can he get to 49 or even 50% in Michigan, or how much room for growth is there? Whoever wants to take that, fire away.
I mean, I think there's a tremendous amount of room for growth from the president. Talk about the issues. All right, you've got the Democrats in the state leading, led by Gretchen Whitmer, pouring billions of dollars into Chinese battery plants. You've got Biden and Harris, driving the issue of electric vehicles. UAW workers and workers in the automobile industry are smart. They know that if we can continue this irrational push towards electric vehicles, which are not yet ready for prime time, they may be, but if it's kind of like a choice between we're pushing electric vehicles irrationally, which threatens the jobs of Michigan workers, or we're going to allow, consumers to pick whatever form of transportation they want. I'm sorry, they're going with that answer. They're going with Donald Trump. The black vote. There seems to be a significant movement of Black young males, 25 to 40, to Donald Trump. That is a good place. And then you just put in place what Billy G was talking about. Inflation, 20% more. And where people are saying, oh, okay, we've got inflation under control. No, prices are not coming down. You've got Boeing workers who are striking for a 30% plus increase in wages. You've got the longshoremen most likely going on strike in less than 12 hours. And they're demanding up to a 70% wage increase. And that's going to filter through to consumers. You've got the continued war on energy. The choice is stop fracking versus drill baby drill. All right, people understand that drill baby drill opens up American resources and will drive down costs. So the choices are very clear, and I think Trump has a significant amount of upside potential and not a whole lot of going down. So this feels a whole lot more like a solid 2016 in a better environment than 2016 than it does 2020.
And just
go ahead, please.
Yeah, and not to piggyback too much off of that, but I would push back and I say this is an election that's about policies, not personalities, especially when you get to the state house level. And you look at the state house caucus putting out House Republican Campaign Committee, putting out our mission for Michigan, 10 points and 10 items that we want to drill in and deliver on for Michiganders next term. Those are things that people can get behind. And all we have seen from the Democrats is a fear campaign. I think Andrew can attest that, a positive forward-looking agenda that resonates with a lot of voters, the issues they care most about, that is a more convincing item than a fear campaign.
Representative Schuette, let me follow up on that. To what extent do you think your candidates for the Michigan House are going to run kind of local state-oriented issues, try to run the Democratic agenda in Lansing against Democratic incumbents, or does this just end up being a microcosm of what's going on nationally? Will it be more of like nationalized races?
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the beauty of the state house, right? Is in our current political environment, there are, 40% of voters, it doesn't matter in what district you are, that are just going to follow the national trends. But the great thing about a district of around 90,000 people is you can really drill down on those specific issues, make your case. And that was one of our priorities as a campaign committee, was to recruit a candidate like Carl Bonack in Marquette, who has, sky high name ID, probably, name ID like the governor has in that district because of his long career in broadcasting, and is able to speak to the issues that people care about, or somebody like, Ron Robinson in Macomb County, who has a background on the city council, can really talk about the issues that are facing the communities he's trying to represent. And I think, these are close races, Zach. I mean, we had 7 races in 2022 decided by less than 2,000 votes, right? And so we're going to make sure we're communicating our message, drilling down to those local issues, getting those swing voters to choose Republicans.
And Andrew, when I think back to 2020, one of the areas where President Trump seemed to really get hurt was what I call the like Biden, John James voters, places like Rochester Hills, Walker, and the northwest suburbs of Grand Rapids. These were places that Joe Biden won, but then John James beat Gary Peters there. And those should be Trump voters, but there's something about the former president, they just could not agree to support him. What are his chances of getting those voters back?
Well, I think it's pretty strong. And this goes to the original question, sort of, does he have any more room to grow? And 2 things stand out to me, and this was the most recent, New York Times poll. Biden's job approval is 40%. 57% disapprove of the job he's doing, and 60% of Americans say that the country's headed in the wrong direction. Vice President Harris owns that, and so unfortunately, Joe Biden's record is her record. And so, yes, there are a lot of voters that don't like the way that things are going.
What do you
and
mean,
so,
unfortunately?
well, that's true. That's true, depending on your point of view. But so, fortunately for Republicans, unfortunately for Democrats, they have to own that record, and Kamala Harris has to own that record. And so, does Donald Trump have a higher ceiling? Yes. And I think, Chairman, you were the one who mentioned it, but there is a definite floor for Donald Trump, and he's not going down. He is where he's at, and he has nowhere to go but up from here. And I think, one of the interesting things is with Kamala Harris, as vice president, when she was just on the cusp of replacing Joe Biden, she was 15 points underwater on her favorability. I think her image is starting to come back down, and voters are starting to remember, why they didn't like her in the first place. And so I do think there's opportunities in the suburbs where, these voters, they're probably more moderate, and maybe after 2016, 2018, maybe decided that Joe Biden was the answer for him. I expect him to come back to Donald Trump because the economy was better, prices were down, and unfortunately, inflation is way up, and so they care about those things. And voters in the suburbs vote with their pocketbooks, and right now their pocketbooks are struggling. And I think actually that some of the national stuff, I think, Donald Trump benefits from some of the policies that have gone on right here in Michigan, and it plays into inflation. Democrats raised income taxes. They slashed education funding. They're giving out corporate welfare, and these are things that play into the larger problems with tightening your purse strings. And they see Democrats in Lansing not doing that, and causing problems for themselves, doubling energy prices. And I think that also that has a trickle up and a trickle down effect on Republican candidates. So I think it helps Donald Trump, and I also think it helps down ballot Republicans too.
All right, I'm going to move to the U.S. Senate race. Just want to remind folks, if you have a question, you can use the Q&A widget at the bottom, or you can use the chat drop your question in there, and we'll get it asked and answered. So, all right, I'm sure you're all sick of talking about this, but the U.S. Senate has been sort of a graveyard for Republicans in Michigan for a long time. One win in the last 50 years, but it's been close the last couple times. And there's what I assume is some exciting news for your side this morning, that the Senate Leadership Fund, which is a major funder of U.S. Senate races, is going to pour another $20 million into advertising in Michigan, which would suggest that they are in this to stay. They're not just going to pull up stakes on Mike Rogers. So how do you think that race is going? Why is it going to finally be different this time around? Pete, why don't you kick it off?
Well, I mean, yeah, it was a huge announcement this morning, in the Wall Street Journal. I'm assuming the Republican leadership put out a statement. I just read the story in the Wall Street Journal, coming 20 plus million coming in for the last 35 days. And, there'll be money coming in. People see this as a very, very winnable seat. Got a great candidate. Mike Rogers has a tremendous record, former FBI agent, chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. So he comes in with a lot of gravitas. The guy's he's working his tail off. He is everywhere, and he's being supported, by running arm in arm with Donald Trump. And we've got money in the state party, which is very surprising. People have run, close to $15 million, and all we really do is mail. But we've already processed more than $15 million worth of mail for Donald Trump, for Mike Rogers, for the state house, and these types of things. That Republicans, I've never seen Republicans this invested at all these different levels. And I think, as Bill will talk about, we're coordinated. The state party, the Trump campaign, the Rogers campaign, the effort for the state house. We are all unified, and we are collaborating as much as the law will allow us to do, to win at all these different levels. And then you've got the congressional races. I got a call from Scalise's people over the weekend saying, "Hey, Pete, we're sending you money. We think we can win 2 to 3 House races," and those types of things. And so, all of that, all of the resources coming in, but the underlying vision and optimism is where the Democrats are underwater on the issues. Okay. When you're underwater on the issues, it's going to make it hard for you to recover. And, as much as they're trying to divert, they just can't. People's pocketbooks are not getting better, in the short run. And so they're voting their pocketbooks. I got to Washington in 1993, when it was, Bill Clinton's, Carvel saying, "It's the economy, stupid." Well, you know what? It's 2024. That hasn't changed a whole lot. It's the economy, stupid, and people are hurting.
It almost feels like, paradoxically, Gongor has an Ohio operation as well. So I have at least one foot, or I have a toe in what's going on in Ohio. And it seems like Sherrod Brown is holding his own there. It almost seems like, paradoxically, that might be good because for you, for Michigan, because it means national Republicans need, if Bernie Moreno can't pull it off there, they've got to go look for some other avenues. And this seems to be one of them. And, it's an open seat. It better beat Alyssa Slotkin now, I assume, or it's going to be a lot tougher.
Absolutely.
To what extent, and anyone can feel free to jump on this, do you think Mike Rogers needs Donald Trump to win Michigan? I look back at this, and not that we always want to look to the past to see what's going to go in the future, but there are very, very few examples in Michigan of a U.S. Senate candidate winning when their party's candidate for president loses Michigan. As far as I can tell, it's only happened twice in ever, 84 and 88, with Carl Levin and Don Regal winning, even as Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush won Michigan. So how critical is it for Trump to carry Michigan to create the path for Mike Rogers?
I don't know that it's essential. Obviously, Donald Trump being competitive is essential, I think. But to piggyback off what the chairman said, I think the most important item is the coordination, and I think with the top of the ticket on down, all working in coordination together to the extent that you legally can. I think that is what carries, a Mike Rogers. And so I don't know that Donald Trump needs to win Michigan. I do think he will, but I don't know that he needs to for Mike Rogers to win. I think it's being competitive. And, the public polling I know shows Slotkin up like 3 or 4. I got to be honest, any of the private polling, I think has had Rogers down 1 at most. So I think he's very much in the ball game, if not winning. And I think the public polling for Trump always shows him consistently down from where he ultimately ends up. So I think he's much better than the public polling shows. I think Mike Rogers is much better than the public polling shows. And I think, Donald Trump, I don't think he needs to win, but it certainly helps. I think there needs to be a competitive presidential race, which there is. And all the different sides need to be working and rowing in the same direction, which they are. And I think those 2 factors are the most important.
Representative Schuette, is there a sweet spot for the president to hit in these key districts? Like, what do you feel like he needs to be at to give your folks a shot?
Yeah, and I think it's helpful again to live in the present, but look towards the past to inform us there. And you look at the 2022 race when we lost, we were 1,450 votes away from holding the gavel, which is pretty painful when you think about some of the damaging policies that have been pushed through these last year and a half. And that was in a year where Whitmer won re-election by more than 10 points. So when you're looking at these state house races, the fact that we're going to have a top of the ticket that is going to be so competitive, whether that's Donald Trump or that's Mike Rogers or some of our congressional races, we're not going to have those same strong environmental headwinds that we were pushing up against last cycle. So the fact that we're in a competitive re-elect environment at the top of the ticket, the fact that we're getting $20 million in investment from the Senate Leadership Fund here in Michigan, the cavalry's coming in. And that's all the House Republicans need is an opportunity to make our own case on a level playing field, and we have that. So I feel very good about it.
Let's hit the Michigan House a little bit. We'll come back to the U.S. House after that. So probably Representative Schuette, you're the person to start out with this. You need to flip 2 seats, assuming you don't lose any, to get to majority. And of course, there's a lot of competitive races, but at least in my mind, this really comes down to 2 races, those being unseating 2 Democratic representatives, Jamie Churches and Wyandotte and Nate Shannon in Sterling Heights. The reason I isolate those 2 is those are the 2 districts where Trump had the highest percentage of the vote in 2020. It seems like environmentally a great opportunity for you all, but how do you see it?
Yeah. And so, I think you look at these seats in a lot of different ways. And, one of them is, where are the seats where the environment is strong and positive. And, there's the Ron Robinson seat where he's running. I mean, that's the Trumpiest seat currently held by a Democrat, and same thing with Jamie Churches. So I feel very good about Riley Linton and Ron Robinson winning both of those races as well. But then there's 10 seats that you zoom out to 2016 that Trump won in 2016, and you hear from Andrew. This is looking like it's better than 2020, and who knows, it's shaping up in a lot of ways to look more like 2016. So that's where, again, talking about how we're localizing these races, the fact that we have a candidate in the Traverse City seat like Lisa Trombley, who really matches her district well, knows how to work on issues that productively move her district forward, not just be a far left liberal progressive like they currently have. I mean, that's what resonates more with that brand, and that's where, again, fighting these races over about 2,000 votes, we'll have opportunities where the environment is good, and we have great candidates that can help take our message anywhere.
Chairman Hoekstra, right now the Michigan Democratic Party has reserved roughly $10 million in advertising in state house races, but the Michigan Republican Party, at least so far, has not. How do you get the cavalry here and Republican donors to come in and prevent your candidates for the state house from getting just outspent 4-1 or something along those lines?
Well, we're working with Matt Hall, but we're not going to be in a position where we want those resources to come to the state party. Okay, we are not going to be the experts on running TV or where to run TV. Working with Matt, working with the Freedom Fund and other organizations, they are using us for where they get this real financial impact. We do mail for 30% less than anybody else. All right. So we're doing a tremendous amount of mail with the State House and other organizations promoting the State House. I know that at least in talking with Matt and talking with Bill, that they're out rustling up additional funds to put more money into a TV campaign. I don't know whether they're going to get to parity or not with the Democrats. I doubt it. Okay. But the bottom line is, when you take a look at all the money that is coming in for Trump, Rogers, congressional seats, and the money that the state house is raising with some of these outside organizations, we're going to be very, very close to parity in the total package of delivering the message to Republicans, independents, and soft Democrats. And as Bill was talking about, we're not talking about changing, hundreds of thousands of votes at the state house level to switch those two seats or to switch two seats. We're talking about convincing people, 1,000. Well, I guess it's 1,000 voters to come out and vote Republican instead of Democrat at the state house level. And I'm probably more confident of all the different levels that we're talking about, that Republicans are going to elect a speaker, because at the top of the ticket lost by 11 points in 2022. That is hard for a down ticket state house campaign to overcome. Well, this is not going to be an 11-point loss by the top of the ticket. I think we're going to win the top of the ticket. Mike Rogers is going to win at the top of the ticket. And, we're not going to have a 10-11% fall off from the top of the ticket to the bottom. We're going to elect a speaker in January.
Mm-hmm. And Zach, I'll just chime in there as well. A couple of things on these media reservations you're seeing from the Democrats. One, a lot of this money is independent expenditure, issue advocacy dollars, which don't go dollar for dollar as far as hard caucus dollars. They're also being spent in the Detroit DMA, which is a very expensive broadcast media market that touches a lot of different state house districts. I think like 30 different state house districts. So it's a bang for your buck, really not going very far. And then between the Harris campaign, the Trump campaign, Rogers, Slotkin, you're seeing a lot of competition for those dollars and for those money. So obviously, I think that they've got a lot of money from George Soros, and Eric Holder's fund has done a great job of getting them those soft dollars into the state of Michigan. But I know our hard dollar fundraising, the stuff that goes longer and stronger for Republicans, we have those resources. Chairman Hoekstra is correct. We're certainly rustling the trees for more resources. But again, I think that the reception from donors across the state, small and large, has been we got to bring some balance back to Lansing, and so I'm confident that we will have the resources we need to win this thing.
I mean, it is interesting if you look at where like the House Republicans are spending the most money, it does seem to be in areas where the TV, you know, you've got fewer districts within the viewing area, and it's less expensive. So like Kathy Schmaltz, the Lansing Jackson TV market, and you know, there's what, maybe 10 districts there as opposed to 50 in the Detroit market. So it'll be really interesting to see how that plays out. Andrew, I wanted to ask you a question, because Chairman Hoekstra hit on this, which is, you know, in the 2 midterms since Trump first won the presidency, there was this fall off in the Republican vote. You know, kind of those Trump motivated voters didn't show. Obviously, he's back. And to what extent do you think that is going to make the difference alone against some of these state house Democratic incumbents, like somebody like Jamie Churches, who has never run with Trump on the ballot before? Of course, people can split tickets and so forth.
I think the Trump, and I want to be careful how you would classify him. I mean, it's sort of the diehard Trump voters who really, you know, if he's not on the ballot, are not as enthused to show up, and that's it. It is a very real thing, and so I think in this election with Donald Trump on the ballot, Republicans have, I don't want to say a built-in advantage, but I do think there is an added advantage of having the president at the top of the ticket, because there are a lot of voters that show up because he's on the top of the ticket. And so you have, number one, a very contested top of the ticket race with the president, with the Senate race. I mean, these are, you know, maybe toss-ups. They easily winnable for Republicans. Whereas in at least the most recent midterm, you have a not helpful top of the ticket, which affects down ballot, but you have competitive races at the top of the ticket. You have all these Trump voters that really don't show up in midterms, but they definitely show up when Trump's on the ticket. And you have a poor environment for Democrats. And I do think that Trump and the top of the ticket help in these state house races.
And so before we move on from the state house, we've talked about these areas where Trump could be very helpful because he either has won these districts or come very close in the past. But there's a couple districts where you know, his numbers have slid in Oakland County, namely you've got 2 Republican incumbents, Mark Tisdale in Rochester Hills and Donnie Steele in Orion Township. These weren't Biden landslides by any means, but you know, maybe a little bit more of a challenging environment. Representative Schuette, can you speak to those two? Clearly, that, you know, the Democrats are throwing millions into broadcast television there for better or worse.
Yeah. So, you know, what's interesting about both of those races in Oakland County is I was talking to somebody around town in Lansing who will remain nameless, and they said, how can Mark Tisdale win re-election with Trump on the ballot? And I looked at them and I said, well, because he won election the first time as a non-incumbent with Trump on the ballot. And then he won re-election in 2022 with Whitmer getting reelected by double digit. Whitmer won his seat by 10 or 11 points. I don't think Harris is going to win that district by 11 points. And so, you know, in those races where you have Mark Tisdale and a Donnie Steele and a Tom Kuhn are 3 areas where the Democrats are spending a lot of money. That is where you're seeing candidates who, like Mark Tisdale, literally was the mayor of Rochester. Donnie Steele is, you know, from, you know, service on the Orion Township Board, and Tom Kuhn on the Oakland County Commission. Those are brands that voters in Oakland County respect. And you talked about split ticking. Those split ticket voters, maybe they don't, you know, pull the lever for Trump at the top of the ticket, but they are happy to vote for a Republican down ballot like Mark Tisdale or Donnie Steele, who they know personally, and that's one of the reasons where I'm very confident about our ability to bring those 2 back.
I was going to say, and when you're talking about Oakland County, we have one of perhaps our most effective and energetic county chairs in Oakland County with Vance Patrick, and they are hitting the streets, they're hitting the pavement in a way that we maybe haven't seen in Oakland County in a long time. And they're getting a phenomenal response. So again, this is a level we haven't talked about. You know, the State House is very active on their their call days and those types of things. We're doing them through the state party. But at the same time, we've got some chairwomen around the state who are putting in ground games that Republicans have not experienced. And so
We've knocked
that's
five
also
times as
gonna be
many
helpful.
doors as this time last cycle. Five
What's that?
times as many. We've knocked 5 times as many doors
Yeah.
at the state house level than last cycle.
The whole get out the vote effort from what we're doing, what the Trump team is doing, what the Rogers team is doing, what outside organizations are doing, what the state house is doing, and what county organizations are is it's pretty amazing. It's something that, again, we did, I co-chaired Trump's campaign in 2016. I can tell you, we didn't have that ground game in place in 2016. We are light years ahead of where we were 8 years ago.
Just want to remind folks, please feel free to chime in with questions. You can use the Q&A widget at the bottom or the chat. We'll get to them. But of course, I'm happy to keep firing away here.
Yeah, I was going to say it's kind of
go ahead.
disappointing that of all the folks that are on here, they're not asking where they can send donations to the MIGOP or the State House or Mike Rogers, because we know you all want to be on board and be on board with a winning team. So feel free to contact us after this call, and we'll give you all the information you need to become part of a winning team.
We'll hit the U.S. House and the Michigan Supreme Court in a second, but I want to get to something that's more overall, which is the vastly changed way Michigan voters can cast ballots. 2018, Proposal 3 created no reason absentee voting, same-day registration. 2022, Proposal 2 set up the 9 days of early in-person voting, drop boxes mandated to be in most communities, along with prepaid postage on absentee ballots, and on and on and on and on. It really seemed like we just did a story at Gongor about a week ago. I'd recommend everyone on this call take a look at that. There were some real signs in the August primary that Republican voters are now using these mechanisms, whereas in 22, most of the primary voters on the Republican side were voting old school, in person, on election day, the second Tuesday after the first Monday in August. This time, those numbers, far more Republicans were voting absentee and using the new early in-person option. Can all of you speak to what's going on there about? It seems like there is an effort to get the message out to people. If go ahead and vote absentee, get your vote in. Let's vote now.
Yeah, I mean, Donald Trump has made it clear. Get out and vote often, meaning get out, cast your vote, and then get 9 friends to go cast their votes. Get those ballots banked early, win every day that people can vote, which is what we're driving. We want to get all the high propensity voters, get their votes in, so that, we can then focus our get out the vote efforts on lower propensity voters. And as we get to election day, when where we can identify, unregistered voters, go after them and tell them, no, you can go out and vote. We know, I think we've identified a very, very significant number of unregistered voters, and we will go after them for 35 days, including on election day, contacting them and telling them, you can go in today. And if you want to vote, you can register today. So we're pushing hard and banking those votes early so that we can go after a different scope of voters as we get closer to election day.
Yeah, and I would just chime in too. I helped lead our caucus autopsy after the 2022 campaign, and one of the things that we realized is we can like it or not, but we were ignoring the absentee voter population, and it's now with early voting, that problem would be even magnified and multiplied if we didn't change an approach in this election cycle. So that's one of the things that we've been doing, is making an aggressive outreach in absentee and early voting, making sure we're banking our votes, getting them in early, and that then allows us to when we've gotten the low propensity voters are in the bank voters voting for Republicans, it allows us to really focus and hone in our message on those last minute persuadables.
I think early voting, absentee voting is really only a problem for Republicans when there's disjointed coordination. And obviously you've heard the state party, the Trump campaign, the Rogers campaign, the congressionals. I mean, everybody's rowing in the same direction. And so it's vote by mail, early voting. I mean, it is what it is. And Republicans are much more willing to embrace it. And so we're going to see that share grow, you know, not just this cycle, but future cycles. And a coordinated effort where everyone knows what they're doing and everyone has a role, which is happening. And any sort of Democrat advantage with early voting is really, it's mitigated. And so at least from the Republican standpoint, I don't see this as some big boogeyman where it's sort of lurked in the shadows for Republicans in cycles past.
Let's talk about U.S. House. Obviously, the showcase race seems to be the Tom Barrett, Curtis Ertel Jr. race here in the Capital Region. When Barrett and Alyssa Slotkin faced off 2 years ago, I think that ended up being the most expensive race for U.S. House in America. It's probably on a similar trajectory this time. What do you think gets Tom Barrett over the top this time? What's going to be different for him? I don't. Pete, you want to take that one first?
Sure. I mean, he's going to have the resources. We're not going to lose the top of the ticket by 11 points. It's an open seat. You know, we have a Democrat who I believe signed a non-disclosure agreement working for Whitmer on granting these economic incentives to Chinese battery plants. What we're finding in, you know, polling and talking to people around the state, you know, going after China and talking about protecting our automobile industry, which are, you know, a couple of the main points that are, you know, is within Tom's messaging matrix. You know, those positions are widely popular, and you know, Hertel is on the wrong side of those issues, and so it's you know, it's a much more favorable environment for Tom. And the issue matrix is very, very difficult for Hertel, not only on the macro basis, but also on the micro basis, dealing with the automobile industry.
Representative Schuette, let me ask you about this next one because it's your neck of the woods. The 8th District, open seat. Dan Kildee decides not to run again. It's the first time that there's not a Kildee running up there since the early 70s. You've got Kristen McDonald-Rivet, first-term state senator, up against Paul Young, who lost to Kildee 2 years ago. What do you see up there, Representative? Is this going to be? Can Paul catch on the way he, you know, he didn't do particularly well 2 years ago? Do you think he can? What's the path to him getting over the top this time?
Well, I think Paul absolutely can win. I think Paul is going to win, partly because you're witnessing sort of a political realignment in Genesee County. And you're seeing a lot of voters, whether it's your union voters, your working class folks who are unhappy that, you know, that Michigan Democrats gave billions of dollars to Chinese electric vehicle manufacturer. There's a partisan realignment that's going on in Genesee County, and you know, the Kildee family was sort of able to hold that together in the last couple of cycles. That's no longer there, and I think the NRCC is making the National Republican Campaign Committee is making a significant investment in that race. I know Chairman Oakstra is dialed in and focused on it too. And as somebody who lives in the district and is boots on the ground, I can say that the environment is these are going to be close races. We have two of the marquee congressional races in the country right here in Michigan. But I think when the dust settles, Paul's going to win this thing, and it's because of those voters moving our way in the district.
And Andrew, I want to ask you about, I find the race with, John James running for re-election fascinating. If there's one way you can get Democrats to just hang their heads, it's what happened in 2022 when the National Party, abandoned Carl Marlinga, and John James ends up winning a squeaker. Now they actually are spending money on Mar-a-Lago's behalf, the Democrats. Of course, John James has always been one of the Michigan Republicans' best fundraisers. That's true again. And national Republicans, I'm sure, will spend whatever it takes to get him reelected. But what do you see there? Macomb, of course, can be very fickle, as people saw 2 years ago. When Whitmer carried it, it probably delivered the state house Democrats, but it's always been very friendly to Donald Trump too.
Yeah, I think, I think the top of the ticket and national environment are just going to be very helpful in that race to John James. I think having a competitive top of the ticket keeps him safe. And I know obviously national Democrats want to pour a ton of money in. At some point, they only have so many places that they can put all this money in, so they start spending in some of these reaches. I look at that. I don't know that I have a ton of concern about that race. I think James is just a really strong candidate, period. And so I find it hard to believe that he gets into any trouble there. But he's going to benefit from Donald Trump because, as you mentioned, Trump does well in that area, and so I think that helps, and it'll help down ballot as well.
Pete, close to your stomping grounds, do you think there's going to be a push for Paul Hudson against Hillary Scholten? Right now, national Republicans haven't pumped money in there, but there's not a lot of activity there, period.
Yeah. They haven't embraced Paul yet, although they did last week. They named him a young gun. But they know where they're focused, and they could still come in once they start seeing some trends. I think the other thing that you're taking a look at, especially when you're talking about Barrett and Young, and it'll be interesting to see what's happening on the west side with Hudson, because we're outworking them. Okay, I mean, take a look at this past week. You had J.D. Vance, Traverse City. You had RFK Jr., Lansing on Thursday night. On Friday, you had Trump doing 2 events, one in Grand Rapids, one on the east side of the state. Saturday, you had RFK, I think in, I'm not sure if it was Monroe or Macomb County. You had a 3-day bus tour, Saturday, Sunday, and today going on in Michigan. This, on Wednesday, J.D. Vance is back in for 2 events, one on the southeast, one in southeast Michigan, one in Western Michigan in Ottawa County. I think I wouldn't be surprised if Trump is back in the state for a couple of events this week. I mean, it is amazing the type of energy we see at the top of the ticket, and that does flow down, and the execution is very, very good, and it will benefit State House, and it will benefit the congressional seats. Again, that will help Barrett and Young, but it's also hitting 2 events with J.D. Vance in 2 weeks in the Grand Rapids market. Hudson's district. I think he's going to benefit from that. So it'll be interesting to see how that race evolves. You're right. It's part of my old congressional district. Part of a good chunk of Ottawa County. And Muskegon, I'd really like to see that district get a little bit more attention and flip it back to the Republicans. It can still happen.
Let's just hit the one last call for questions here. So we have a bunch of people who are a little bit shy. That's fine.
Yeah, that's unbelievable.
Happy to ask lots of questions. Michigan Supreme Court, Pete, do you think there's going to be some type of funding behind your candidates, Andrew Fink and Judge O'Grady? Hopefully I got the name right there.
Yep.
So far it's been really one-sided, and these do seem to be largely television campaigns, and it's been pretty one-sided so far.
I believe that there will be independent expenditures coming in a significant way for our Supreme Court races, and that's typically what has happened in the past. And so, I think again the resources will be there. And I'll be the first to admit that it has damaged to some extent when we didn't have a party in place for 14 months to put in place everything that was necessary to get done what we need to get done in November. But I can't tell you how thrilled I am with what has happened in the last 5 or 6 months to make sure that, we are now. I mean, the Trump campaign was ready to leave the state early this year because of the state of the Republican Party. And I can't tell you how thrilled I am with, how Matt Hall and the House have stepped up, how major donors have stepped up, how the Freedom Fund has stepped up, how independent expenditures are happening. And, thank goodness for all the effort that Mike Rogers was putting in place before we had a state party to get the resources and the ground game in place. And I'm obviously thrilled that the Trump campaign came back and looked at Michigan and said, wow, with this new collaboration and with all the Republicans working together, this is a good place we can do. And Trump loves Michigan. He loves the auto industry. He loves blue collar workers, and he loves to be viewed as the guy who's fighting for reform and accountability that will save blue collar jobs in a place like Michigan. And so we have really turned it around, and that's why we are competitive in all of these places. And I think we will be competitive for the Supreme Court as well.
Well, we've just got a couple of minutes left, so absent any questions, maybe if everyone could just give a quick final thought. Or
Zach,
Rob, would you rather me flip it to you, Rob, and we'll tie it up?
I just had one question. I always like bold predictions in these things, and seeing as how we're the last day of September, and I think of all years, this is probably one we can count on some sort of October surprise right here. So I was just hopeful that our panelists could give us their version of an October surprise and a bold prediction moving forward.
From my perspective, the 16 and 20, the October surprise was generated from our intelligence community. Both people, from my perspective, that have strong ties to our intelligence community. In 2016, it was the Russia Gate, which ended up being a hoax. 2020, it was the Hunter Biden laptop expose by 51 former intelligence folks who were not that intelligent when they said the Hunter Biden laptop was, again, Russian disinformation. I expect it's going to be something like that coming in September. It's going to be, or in October. It's going to be too late. We're going to be looking at November 6th. We're going to be looking at Donald Trump as president-elect. We're going to be looking at the next senator from Michigan being Mike Rogers. We're going to be looking at picking up at least 2 seats in our congressional delegation. And we're going to be looking at Bill going back to the State House in January and going back with a Republican Speaker of the House. I am extremely bullish on where we are for Michigan. And I think it's not irrational exuberance. I think it's based on reality and recognizing that this election is going to be about reform, accountability, and change. And that person who is seen as bringing the most change to America and to Washington is not Donald Trump. Excuse me, is Donald Trump. It is not Kamala Harris, who's been part of this failed administration for the last 4 years. The change agent is Donald Trump, and that's what people are looking for.
And I would just say, you go ahead, Andrew.
Nope, it's all you.
Okay. I would say that the October surprise that I'm banking on is a Tigers pennant run. We're going to keep our focus on for winning the State House. When the dust settles, Republicans are going to win from the White House to the State House.
I think my October surprise is that there isn't an October surprise. I think this is a toss up. like environment all the way through election day. And, I go back to, again, on this day in Michigan in 2020, Biden was +7. On this day in 2016, Hillary Clinton was +5. And we know how the results ended up. And right now, Harris on the average in Michigan is +1.8. We know Donald Trump consistently outperforms the public polling. So like my other two panelists here, I am extremely bullish on Michigan. And I think, sleeping on Donald Trump and Republicans, I think you do so at your own peril. And I expect a big night for Republicans in November.
All right. Well, listen, this has been really great. I want to thank Chairman Hoekstra, Representative Schuette, and Andrew Weissert for joining us. And, for everybody who's still on the call, we'll be back. I forget exactly when, but in about a week or two with a panel of Democrats. And then there's another panel. We'll have the baldly bipartisan duo of Adrian Heeman and John Selleck after, I believe, the day before the election. So appreciate the partnership with Kelly Cawthorn on this.